Backstage at the VMAs. And back then this was not some sleek green room situation. It is a glorified tent full of hairspray and cigarette smoke, and about 400 egos trying not to make eye contact with each other. You are standing there in the crowd, holding a drink you do not remember getting, and off to one side is Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love with their actual infant daughter, just existing in the middle of all this chaos. Then Axl Rose strides by. He stops, squares his shoulders, and glares at Kurt. You shut your bitch up, or I am taking you down to the pavement. Kurt simply turns to Courtney and says, "Shut up." The entire room erupts in laughter. This really happened. And today we are looking at some of the most iconic moments in MTV celebrity feuds through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. The history of MTV is paved with rivalries that transcended the screen and became cultural touchstones. To understand how we arrived at the peak of pop culture chaos, we have to start at the very beginning. But before we do, if you enjoy this type of content, please remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on some of your other favorite MTV moments. And let's talk about it. In the early 1980s, MTV wasn't just a music channel, it was a contested territory. The network's initial refusal to play black artists created an institutional rift that forced a necessary reckoning. When David Bowie sat down for what was supposed to be a standard promotional interview for his album Let's Dance with VJ Mark Goodman in 1983, he pointedly asked why there were practically no black artists on the network, exposing the gatekeeping at the heart of the industry. Hold up. Let's pause for a second. For anyone watching who was born after the invention of Wi-Fi, we probably need to explain what a VJ is. A VJ, or video jockey, was basically the ancient, mystical ancestor of today's YouTubers and TikTok influencers. Their entire, highly coveted job was to stand in front of a camera, look effortlessly cool, conduct on-air interviews, and introduce music videos. Yes, believe it or not, there was a time when music television actually played music videos instead of just running reality TV reruns every single week. Anyway, back to the story. Goodman scrambled to defend the network using a corporate strategy called narrowcasting. He argued that the channel was tailored to an 18 to 24-year-old suburban white demographic, and literally used the excuse that MTV executives were afraid of how viewers in places like Poughkeepsie would react to black musicians. Bowie politely but firmly dismantled the excuse on their own airwaves, exposing the deep irony of a youth music channel ignoring the black artists who actually pioneered rock, soul, and funk. It took a high-stakes standoff, where CBS Records president Walter Yetnikoff threatened to pull all of their massive white artists like Billy Joel to finally break that barrier and allow Michael Jackson's Billie Jean into heavy rotation. This moment set a precedent. The network was not just a passive broadcaster, but a power player where institutional tension could dictate the cultural narrative. That foundational conflict paved the way for the artist-to-artist warfare that would define the 1990s, bringing us back to that legendary clash between Nirvana and Guns N' Roses at the 1992 VMAs. The tension had been brewing for months. Axl Rose had originally been a massive Nirvana fan, even wearing a Nirvana baseball cap in the Don't Cry music video, and he repeatedly hounded Nirvana to open for Guns N' Roses on a massive stadium tour. Kurt Cobain refused. Cobain despised what he viewed as GNR's corporate rock vibe and publicly condemned Rose for the racist and homophobic lyrics in the song One in a Million, calling him a sexist and a racist and a homophobe. After the backstage tent confrontation we just talked about, the hostility bled right onto the stage. Following Nirvana's chaotic performance of Lithium, which ended with bassist Chris Novoselic accidentally knocking himself out by throwing his bass 25 feet into the air, drummer Dave Grohl repeatedly taunted Rose by yelling, "Hi Axl, where's Axl?" into his microphone. But Cobain got the final disgusting word. Beneath the stage, he found a hydraulic piano he assumed belonged to Axl Rose, and hawked massive spit wads all over the keyboard. He later watched the broadcast in sheer horror as Elton John came out and performed his legendary duet of November Rain with Guns N' Roses on those exact spit-covered keys. The 90s truly was wild, y'all. Speaking of Courtney, by the mid-1990s, live television disruptions were becoming an MTV staple, but none were as perfectly awkward as the 1995 collision between Madonna and Courtney Love. MTV News anchor Kurt Loder was conducting a serious sit-down interview with Madonna on a platform outside Radio City Music Hall. Suddenly, makeup compacts came flying through the air, whizzing right past Madonna's head. Down below was Courtney Love, visibly intoxicated and throwing items to get their attention. Madonna dryly quipped, "Courtney Love is in dire need of attention right now," and literally begged Loder not to invite her up. But Loder knew this was television gold and brought her up anyway. What followed was 4 minutes of excruciatingly chaotic tension. Love rambled over Madonna, launching into a bizarre metaphor where she compared rock stardom to working in a hospital and going out with an ambulance driver. She then looked at Madonna and sarcastically said she just dipped into the population. Madonna fired back with cold, calculated precision. When Courtney said she liked being in the hospital because of the nice clothes and good money Madonna sniped and a lot of available drugs, the clash perfectly highlighted their completely opposing personas. Madonna's icy, highly controlled pop mastery rubbing up against Courtney's raw, chaotic, and messy grunge energy. Now, we are going to skip ahead to the 2000s for this one, an era when the media absolutely loved to tear down female pop stars. If you grew up watching Total Request Live, you might remember July 19th, 2001. I know I do, as it was always one of my favorite top Mariah moments, which could be a whole different video on its own, but anyways. Mariah Carey was promoting her movie Glitter and its lead single, Loverboy. She made what seemed to be a completely unannounced surprise appearance on the live TRL set, pushing an ice cream cart and handing out popsicles to fans. She then spontaneously stripped off her oversized t-shirt to reveal a tight green halter top and gold shorts. Host Carson Daly acted completely blindsided by the intrusion. He looked at the cameras and literally said, "Mariah Carey has lost her mind." Mariah then went on a rambling monologue, telling Carson she needed therapy because of Carson's bewildered reaction. The media aggressively branded the appearance as a very public mental breakdown. Just days later, Mariah was hospitalized for extreme exhaustion and psychiatric treatment. Her reputation was severely damaged and her Glitter soundtrack completely tanked. But wait, in her 2020 memoir, Mariah revealed the shocking truth behind that day. The TRL appearance was actually a planned promotional stunt. Carson Daly allegedly knew she was coming, but he made the bewildering decision to act totally surprised, essentially gaslighting her on live television. Mariah called it a stunt gone awry, noting that his refusal to riff with her is what made her look erratic, setting off a chain reaction that placed a massive target on her back. So MTV figured out something kind of messed up as the decade went on. They didn't actually need musicians to cause drama. They could just make themselves. The real world basically invented reality TV conflict as we know it. 1994. The real world, San Francisco. This one's wild. Pedro Zamora, young, gay, HIV positive, using the show to educate people about AIDS. A hero, straight up. Then there's David Puck Rainey, who they cast specifically to be an obnoxious antagonist. That was his whole job, not even subtle about it. Puck spent the season mocking Pedro, dismissing his activism, just making the house miserable to live in. Eventually, the roommates had enough and voted him out. And when you actually sit with that for a second, you're watching a real human rights activist trying to live his life while a guy hired by a network actively torments him for ratings. Wild. But San Francisco was the nice version of reality TV. This next one shows you exactly how far MTV was willing to go. 1998. The Real World. Seattle. Irene McGee's dealing with Lyme disease and she's got real problems with how the producers are manipulating the cast, so she decides to bounce. Walking out to her car, she gets into it with her roommate Steven, outs him on camera. He runs down the pier, opens her car door, slaps her across the face. Already shocking. But MTV's response is the part that gets me. Producers play the tape for the rest of the cast and make them vote on whether Steven gets to stay in the house as long as he does anger management. Let that sink in. A house of 20-somethings voting on the consequences of an assault. That's basically MTV saying ratings over safety out loud. It's wild to think that a group of 20-somethings had that kind of power over someone's consequences, but that's exactly the moment MTV pivoted hard. Ratings over basic human safety, and they never really looked back. That's the thing about reality TV in this era. It wasn't really about reality at all. It was a lab, and the network controlled every variable. Who got cast? Who got provoked? Who got the edit that made them the villain? We just didn't know it yet. So, did you watch any of this live? And be real, if this happened on TV today, do you think the internet would have let MTV get away with it? Drop it below. Like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.